Hey everyone, I'm Armory Gaming. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is a metal monster known as Roxen. Along with his twin brother Nexor, Roxen leads a gang of looters in the post-apocalyptic era. He likes building his weapons out of pieces of industrial machinery. If the pieces are stained with radioactive fluids, he likes them even better. Here we have the different forms of Roxen as a child, as a teen, as an adult, and overall I think this monster is pretty darn cool. He looks really menacing, definitely like a monster that can survive a post-apocalyptic era. And now let's see if his stats are fitting to his character. Roxen has a power of 3,531. Now when we talk about only metal legendary monsters, it isn't too high, it's 7 out of 17th place, but I should mention that it is still a really high power. In fact, the only reason his power ranks him 7th place is because there's a chunk full of monsters that have the power set 3,542. Which isn't even that much higher, it's only 11 points, and there's 2 monsters that have a power of 3,575, so overall a power of 3,531, still really high. As for his life, Roxen has a life of 31,969, and this is actually officially the highest life for metal legendary monsters. Drawsum, Metalhead, and Holter's Pet move aside because Roxen is now the newest metal monster with the highest life, so yes, this monster is definitely a survivor. Unfortunately for Roxen, his speed is 3,377, and out of the 17 metal legendary monsters, this puts him in 14th place, tied with Megapolaris. So yes, he has a high power, yes he has the highest life, but in terms of speed, he's not really that fast. Fortunately for Roxen, his trait is hardened, all status effects have a 20% less accuracy against it, so there are plenty of metal monsters that have stun skills, quite a few that have possession skills, and of course Roxen does have a 20% chance not to get affected by any of those things. And on another note, Roxen is an attacker, not a deny monster, so the thing about attackers is that even if their speed is kind of low, that's really fine because as long as you have a deny monster that can immobilize the enemy monsters, then your attacker is free to attack the enemy. But anyways, let's move on to Roxen's skills. For his default skills, we have Roxen Mace, Roxen Gun, very interesting names. As for his special, we have Fuel Tank Explosion. Deals massive special damage to all enemies, may apply shock and daze to all targets. So there's a little mix up with this monster's description and the little icons. So the first thing we see is that this is supposed to deal massive special damage to all enemies, but right here it's reporting it as being a metal based attack. And from the videos I've seen, it actually turns out it is a metal based attack. And I usually don't like it when special attacks are elemental based as opposed to just being special based, but in the case of Roxen and in the case of most metal monsters, it's fine because they have lots of skills that magnetize for 3 turns. So if the enemy monsters tend to be magnetized and then you hit them with your ultimate attack that is metal based, then that is going to deal some serious damage. On another note, this says may apply shock and daze to all targets, but when we see the icons, it applies magnetized and oil grease. And oil grease is essentially the same thing as sticky lava, which basically makes any monster that has sticky lava weak to fire attacks by 80%. Now it's kind of weird that they introduced oil grease when we already have sticky lava which do the exact same thing. You would think that Social Point meant to do an upgraded version of Magnetize, something that makes attacks from metal attacks 80% stronger as opposed to 50% stronger, you know, almost like a debilitating shadows but for metal attacks. But I guess we have oil grease, which again is the same thing as sticky lava. And you're probably wondering, why do we have a skill like oil grease on a metal monster? Well, it turns out, let me scroll down to skills group 1. This monster, although he's a legendary, he has fire attacks and metal attacks, so he has both, which really makes things a lot more interesting. So his ultimate, I would say it's a pretty darn good ultimate. Really strong, 70 damage, it's an AoE, magnetizes and oil grease. This skill is going to make the monsters weak to future attacks if they happen to survive. That's awesome. But anyways, let's go back to the skills. He has fire and metal, and this can definitely come in handy in specific team wars. If there's ever a case when you're going up against nature monsters and metal doesn't need to be your deny monster, for example if the third monster can be a legendary monster, then you're going to have a serious advantage if you use Roxen as opposed to any other metal monster, because you have that fire elemental advantage over nature. And as far as this monster not having any legendary attacks, again, because he can magnetize and then use a metal attack on a metal monster, you're fine there. And because this monster has fire attacks, he can just use his fire attacks on the enemy metal monsters. So it doesn't particularly matter too much that he doesn't have any legendary attacks. If anything, I think it makes him more flexible and a little more advantageous against certain monsters. But back to skills. We have scrap metal, dirty can, gas oil cans. Nothing from skills group 1 is worth running, so we're going to skip that and go to skills group 2. Now before I actually get into analyzing his skills, I have to say that Roxen, like many other metal monsters, there's no definite concrete best skill set for this monster. You can realistically choose anything from skills group 2, anything from skills group 3, and you're gonna be good to go. And since you have 6 different skills to choose from, that means there's a variety of different skill sets. So I'm gonna do my best to give pros and cons of different skills, and at the end I will describe what skill set I would use for this monster if I do get him. But at the very end of the day, it's ultimately gonna be up to you to decide what you want to run, and a lot of it really depends on what kind of runes you have, what kind of enemies you tend to fight more often, and all these different external factors. So anyways, let's begin. Scrap Law. Deals moderate metal damage, may stun target, requires cooldown. This skill targets a single enemy for 50 damage, 27 stamina, has a 1-turn cooldown, and it stuns. Now, it's a little tricky to decide if we want to run Scrap Law or not. For one, it does have stun, which is amazing. In my opinion, if an attacker has an immobilizing skill, that's even better because there's always that just in case. Just in case you're not strong enough to finish off an enemy, you want to immobilize them. Just in case the enemy is 1 turn from winning, you immobilize the enemy monster. Having some sort of immobilizing skill, whether the monster is an attacker or a denier, I always prefer it. But at the same time, there's attackers that are really strong. Roxen has the capacity to be one of those, that when you give those monsters high enough level strength runes, given the monster's power, the strength runes, and then a strong skill, that monster will be strong enough to take out enemy monsters that have base life in just 1 hit. And this monster is an example of that. Just to show you really quickly, 75 damage, 1 cooldown, 75 damage, 1 cooldown. So in many instances, running Scrap Law that only deals 50 damage, sure you're going to be able to immobilize, but maybe if you had the 75 damage skill, that would have been strong enough to take out the enemy monster. And the best deny is, after all, just wiping out the enemy. So Scrap Law is an example of a skill that you ultimately have to decide for yourself, do you need to run the skill or not, if you don't have high level runes. And I can't say for sure how high leveled your runes have to be, but if you know for a fact that if you were to give this monster your best strength runes, and a skill like Can or Metal Judgment isn't strong enough to take out an enemy monster, then you probably want to stick with Scrap Law and avoid running one of these two 75 damage skills. Moving on, we have Cripple Cans. Deals low metal damage to all enemies, may magnetize all targets, makes enemies very weak against fire attacks, requires cooldown. It's an AoE, 30 damage, 41 stamina, 3-turn cooldown. And this is normally the part where I'd say it's your typical AoE magnetizing skill that all metal monsters have, but Roxen takes it one step further, and aside from giving magnetize, he also applies oil grease. This is like a weaker version of his special attack. Nonetheless, the effects it dishes out are great. Magnetize and oil grease. So regardless of what skill you use after this skill, it's still going to deal some major damage, especially if you follow it up with something like Can Detonation. Deals massive fire damage, requires cooldown. A 75 damage skill that only costs 24 stamina and has a 1-turn cooldown. So most of you already know that I love when a skill is 27 stamina, because if your monster had 0 stamina but had stamina regeneration, that would allow the monster the ability to use that skill. While 24 stamina, that's less than 27, so obviously you're going to be able to use this skill too. This is a really great skill. The damage output is insane, 75 damage, and it only has a 1-turn cooldown. You can pretty much imagine that after you hit a monster with Cripple Cans, and then after that you target one monster and do Can Detonation, that monster isn't going to be alive any longer. The damage output is just going to be way too great. In skills group 3, we have Metal Judgment, which is just the metal version of his previous skill. Deals massive metal damage, requires cooldown. 75 damage, 4 more stamina, this is 28. So with this skill specifically, if you did have 0 stamina and had stamina regeneration, you wouldn't recover enough stamina to be able to use this skill. So in that example, Metal Judgment is a little inferior, but again, it does have a 1-turn cooldown, and this is another great skill that after you use Cripple Cans and follow it up with Metal Judgment, that monster is most likely not going to be alive. And then we have Dum Dum Bullets. Deals moderate metal damage to all enemies, requires cooldown. It's an AoE that deals 45 damage, costs 36 stamina, and has a 3-turn cooldown. And this is the part where I say he's like your typical metal monster that has an AoE magnetize, followed by a 45 damage metal based AoE. So of course an obvious combo is to do Cripple Cans and follow it up with Dum Dum Bullets. Now for me personally, I'm tired of all my metal monsters having that exact same skill set, and realistically if you were to do Cripple Cans and follow it up with Dum Dum Bullets, that's probably all you need to wipe out the whole enemy team. You wouldn't need any more skills. So of course if you want him to be like your other metal monsters, you could of course equip those 2 skills and do that combo. A nice interesting touch though, this monster also has a skill called Combustion Cans. Deals low fire damage to all enemies, may burn all targets, requires cooldown. It's an AoE dealing 30 damage, costs 37 stamina, has a 3-turn cooldown, and this gives burning. And the cool thing is that this skill also works with Cripple Cans. So if you were to do Cripple Cans you would equip oil grease on the enemy monsters, so you follow that up with combustion cans, which although it's only a low 30 damage, thanks to oil grease, it will deal 80% more damage, and on top of that, the enemies will be burned. It's hard to say which combo will be stronger, whether cripple cans with magnetized followed by a 45 damage metal based AoE, or whether cripple cans followed by combustion cans, which although is only a 30 damage AoE, it does have oil grease, so quite possibly that might be worth testing. Now, as I already said, there's so many different skill sets you can run, any combination of the following 6 skills and you're good to go. I wouldn't recommend, however, running cripple cans, dum-dum bullets, and combustion cans in one build, and the reason for that is that running 3 AoEs, it's hardly ever necessary. I already mentioned, if you do cripple cans, follow it up with dum-dum bullets, more often than none, you're going to wipe out the enemy team. Potentially you're going to wipe out at least 2 of the enemy monsters. The same thing is probably going to happen if you do cripple cans and combustion cans, so there's really no need to run a 3rd AoE. Likewise, if you do cripple cans and run either can or metal judgment, that's enough to kill 1 monster for sure. So if you were to do cripple cans and then metal judgment, you probably won't even need an AoE again because there's only going to be 2 monsters alive. And if you run metal judgment and can, you can just use can to take out the other metal monster. So there's so many different skill sets. Again, I kind of caution against cripple cans. However, you can also make the argument that you want to run cripple, dum-dum, and combustion cans just in case, because you never know what the enemy monster can have. For example, if you're going up against an enemy team that has a lot of life runes, then I think combustion cans would benefit you more, just because of that burning takes away 15% of the monster's max health. Whereas dum-dum bullets, although it might deal initially more damage, combustion cans overall would benefit you more. And dum-dum bullets might come in handy more if the enemy monsters have no life runes, and then dum-dum bullets is strong enough to take them all out, whereas combustion cans isn't. So even an argument can be made for running all 3 AoEs. As for the 3rd skill, it's really up to you. But as for the skill set I'm planning on using, I think I'm definitely going to use cripple cans. It's too good not to use. I think I might run scrap law just because I know for a fact my runes aren't high enough to where I can one hit 1 monster guaranteed. So it's probably going to be cripple cans, scrap law, can detonation, and honestly, if you're deciding between can detonation or metal judgment, go with can detonation. It's overall superior to metal judgment. For one reason, because it's 24 stamina. For the second reason, because when you do cripple cans, fire attacks benefit more than metal attacks. So oil grease 80% to magnetize 50%. So I'm probably going to run all of skills group 2, and right now I'm leaning towards running combustion cans as opposed to dum-dum bullets. And one reason is just because the cripple cans, fire attacks get a stronger buff than metal attacks, but also because it gives burning, even if dum-dum bullets is stronger. And even if that's not the case, I am just really tired of the whole AoE magnetized followed by a 45 damage AoE. If I want to do that, I can probably do it with any other metal monster. So myself personally, I kind of want to switch things up a little with Roxen. So overall, I do think Roxen is a pretty good metal monster, a great addition to the metal legendary monsters, definitely a lot more flexible than other metal monsters. And with that being said, that is going to conclude my analysis on Roxen. Thank you to everyone who made it to the end of the video. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on Roxen. Do you think he's good? Do you think he's not so good? Do you think he's better than other metal attackers? Or do you think he doesn't really stand much of a chance? So please share your thoughts below in the comments. I love reading what you guys have to say about certain monsters. And I hope everyone has a great amazing day or a great amazing night. Remember to dream big and pursue your passions.